Hi, and welcome to the next tutorial in the C# beginner tutorial series for the Stride game engine. In this tutorial, we'll learn how to get the children of an entity. In the previous tutorial, we've already seen how to get the parent of an entity. But here, in this tutorial, and in this particular scene, we will learn how to retrieve children and subchildren of entities. In our scene, we have a blue teapot, which is called parent. It has two children, child 0 and child 1, which are these yellow ones, and child 1 has subchildren, which are called subchild 0 to 2, which are these green teapots. What we're going to do, we're going to write a script, we're going to attach it to the parent, which I've already done here, and what we're going to do is we're going to print out the names of all entities here in the scene, or at least of all these teapots here. Let's open Visual Studio. The first thing that we want to do is retrieve the first child. We can do this in various ways. Let's create a variable called child0, and then all we have to do here is say entity followed by getChild, and between the parentheses we have to specify the index of a child. Now the first index is always 0. This means that we will get that first teapot in the scene. We can do the exact same thing to get the second child, which is then called child 1. But if we want to get a third child, which in our case wouldn't exist or doesn't exist, then we run into a little issue. If we would run this script right now, we would get an exception. Our game would actually crash, because when we try to get a child based on the index, and that index doesn't exist, there isn't a third child, then that will cause our game to crash. So use this getChild method only if you know for certain that this child exists. Another way to get the children of an object is by using the getChildren method. So instead of saying child2 get all the children, we can do this by using the getChildren method. This doesn't take any parameters, it just returns a list of entities. And note that this is just the first layer of children. If I go back into the scene, and if I would run this script now, it would only return these yellow children. They're the first layer or the direct children of the parent. It would not retrieve the subchildren, which are the children of 1. Let's start drawing out the names of these children. Before we do that, let's first define some variables that keep track at which position we are going to draw. I'm going to say draw x, which will be the x position. Let's keep that at 400. Then we're going to draw at y coordinate 200. And every time we draw a new name, we want to draw it a little bit lower and a little bit to the right. So I'm going to declare an increment value. I'm going to set that to 50. Now let's first draw the name of the current entity. This part with entity name, new int, and then just use draw x and draw y. Need to use the proper type here. There we go. Now let's loop over the children that the current entity has. We can use a for each loop for that. And if we double tap in Visual Studio, we get this little shortcut. Every item is called a child, and we want to loop over all of its children. So what we can do is we can either store this variable that we've collected at the start, or if this list of entities would somehow be updated during your game, then you can also just call that entity get children here again. Now let's draw every child to the scene. So I'm just going to copy this line. Now if we would run this script, then all of the text would be printed on the same line, which is not what we want to do. That's why we have to update the draw y coordinate here. We'll just update that with the increment value. We also want to draw it a little bit to the right. So here we just add the increment value as well. So the first child, so that first teapot is going to be drawn at draw x, which is coordinate 400, plus the increment value, which is 50. We do that for both teapots, but for each yellow teapot, we increase the y coordinate with 50. We also mustn't forget to draw the actual name of the child, because right now we're just drawing the name of the current entity again. So instead, we can say child. Now let's try and run this game and see how this looks. Now that the game has started, click on the child entities scene, and there we go. We can see that the parent is being drawn to the screen, green, and the child 0 and child 1, they're drawing each 50 pixels lower and a little bit to the right. Now let's do the exact same thing for all of the subchildren. We go back to this for each loop, and inside that for each loop, we're going to make another for each loop. But this time, instead of having the child, we have the subchild. Now it is possible that we do not have any subchildren. In this case, nothing will be drawn, but our child 1, which is the second yellow teapot, it has 3 subchildren. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this draw line once more. We're going to draw the name of the subchild, and we also have to make sure that every time we draw it, this subchild, this has to be put a little bit to the right once more. So we multiply the increment value with 2. We also have to make sure that the draw y is again incremented. Otherwise, we would draw the name of our child on the same level as every subchild. We don't want to do that. So let's save this and run it once more. Once again, we click on child entities. And now we can see that all these subchildren are printed out to the screen as well. That was it for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we'll learn about the entity transform and how to get positions.